before the webinar proceeds, I would like to express that in case anyone in the audience feels uneasy or triggered during the session on the ongoing conversation, please feel free to reach out to us or leave the webinar at any point of time. Your well-being is of utmost importance to us. Keeping that in mind, hello everyone on this beautiful day. I, Amisha Gupta, welcome you all on behalf of the Reimagining Society on the second episode of our In-House Wellbeing Series on the topic suicide prevention. While suicide has always been an issue in the society, it seems like that the current havoc of the COVID-19 has somewhat instigated it further. At Reimagining Society, we firmly believe in the motto, where there is life, there is hope. And with the same spirit in our mind, we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Nelson Vinod Moses, the founder of Suicide Prevention India Foundation, one of the leading non-profit organizations of India incubated by IIM Bangalore. SPIF was created with the underlying mission of establishing a community-based platform for organizations and individuals who were interested in awareness creation, self-care, research, advocacy, training, and suicide prevention to come and fight suicide together. Mr. Nelson is a freelance journalist who writes on mental health and social entrepreneurship. His writings have appeared on Fortune, Forbes, The Times of India, Quartz, Huffington Post, and many other famous platforms. He is also the founding managing trustee of Praful Urja, a non-profit organization that provides yoga training and services to the underprivileged population, including children with special needs, rural women, and the youth. With the aforementioned introduction, I welcome Mr. Nelson on Reimagining Society's platform to share his wisdom on such an important issue. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to interacting with all of you. This topic is highly relevant, and let's get straight to it. My apologies for being late. I was outside and I got delayed and took a little time to get onto Zoom. So without further ado, I'd like to actually answer more questions than talk, so that it's relevant to whoever is interested to ask me questions, and I can answer them. Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely. Yeah, my co-host Siddharth would be taking over from here.
Thank you very much, Amishreya, for that introduction.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, we have prepared a question on behalf of our team, as well as we got a lot of questions from the audience as well in our application form itself. So guys, first of all, before we start, I have few reminders for you all. Now you can confirm your presence at any time during the program by filling out the attendance form available in the comment section. We'll be receiving entries from 15 minutes before the program to 45 minutes after the program. Please note that e-certificates will be provided within 1 week to whoever will fill up the attendance form. The form will be available only in the customized group. The link with proper guideline has already been sent to the email to all the participants 3 times, including today. E-certificates will not be provided if you fail to fill the attendance sheet, so kindly check the promotional or spam folder if the email has not been found in your primary folder. Second point, we Reimagining Society added a lot of thought to the question that, can talking about suicide give people the idea to do it? Could we do more harm than good? Guys, to be honest, we were confused, and therefore we talked to various experts, including some high experts from Center for Disease Prevention, USA, and they also told us that talking about suicide does not make suicide to occur. In fact, it can be an excellent prevention tool. People who are not suicidal reject the idea, while people who may be thinking about it usually welcome the chance to talk about it. Often they are relieved because they feel that someone else recognizes their pain. Moreover, talking breaks the secrecy that surrounds suicidal behavior and lets people know that help is available. By not talking about suicide, we are we increase the isolation and despair of individuals thinking about it. And yeah, that's the reason why we Reimagining Society came up with this topic and the Q&A session. Still, guys, if you are a person who gets stressed by the thought of this idea itself, we'll recommend you not attend the webinar and talk to a friend or family. If no one is available, you can always email us at info@reimaginingsociety.com. Now, coming to the Q&A part. Yeah, so Nelson, first question from our team is that if a person seems disturbed, is it safe to ask if they're thinking about hurting themselves? Can mere asking increase the danger of self-harm?
Before I answer that question, what I'm going to do is share some numbers on chat. These numbers, the first one I'm sharing is a list of clinical psychologists, and this is available for free. Please share it on the Facebook page. And secondly, I'm going to share a list of 24/7 helplines that can be called, and I think it's important to share that as well. Yeah, I'm going to share 3 numbers.
Yeah, sure, sir.
And then we can get started. Yeah, I think. So essentially, if any of you are feeling triggered, at any point in time, feel free to log off, or I think inform one of the team members from Reimagining Society so that they can reach out to you. I'm not, or call any of these numbers. You can share these numbers with whoever is attending on Facebook. Okay, coming to the question, can you just repeat it for me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the question is, sir, if a person seems disturbed, is it
Mhm.
safe to ask if they are thinking about hurting themselves? Can mere
Okay.
asking increase the danger of self-harm?
Okay. It's so the question is, if somebody is disturbed, and is it okay to ask them about self-harm or about suicide?
Yeah.
The answer is that it is fine to ask them whether they're thinking of suicide. The way or self-harm, and the way you would ask the question can be different depending on who the person you're talking to, your relationship with the person, and how disturbed the person seems to be. So if you can see visible marks of self-harm, uh, please note that there's a big difference between self-harm and suicide. Uh, attempt to die by suicide. There's the concept of non-suicidal self-injury. Non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, is mostly done by young people who are adolescents or during teens, and this behavior is essentially a response to feeling emotional pain. The non-suicidal self-injury is usually a way for them to divert the attention from the emotional pain to a physical pain, which then provides a temporary relief from the emotional pain, and is not done in an attempt to die by suicide. Okay, that is the difference. However, during the process of injuring yourself, there is the possibility that you could injure yourself severely, or the concept of parasuicide, which is to say, these attempts to harm could then actually end up in a suicide, right? That's one crucial difference. The second, and it is fine to ask about saying, are you okay? And even in those cases, is everything all right? Is there something you want to talk about? I am concerned about your well-being, and I would like to inquire whether you're doing okay. Um, would you like to talk about it? Would you like to have a cup of coffee? Would you like to take a walk with me? Would you just like to sit down and maybe not talk about it? So all of these are very important, right? And coming back to asking somebody about suicide, you cannot plant the idea of suicide into somebody's head if the person is either not thinking about suicide or is even thinking about suicide. You're not going to make the person more suicidal by just asking the person about suicide. In fact, what will happen to the person who's being asked whether they're suicidal is actually a sense of relief. because what they've been carrying, these feelings and emotions which are very powerful and they're very difficult to process, and it's a very heavy load, and most of the time they are dealing with this all alone, and they've actually not got any help, because the feeling that they have going through is one of helplessness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. And during this time they're actually feeling that they are a burden to everybody and they are causing problems, and therefore sharing these problems with somebody, whoever it is, a loved one, a friend, a colleague, a classmate, or a parent. They refuse to share because they feel like they will be adding to the burden uh, of the other person, so therefore they don't share. When somebody who actually would come forward, and they're concerned, and then they would ask this question, they feel relieved. And this is important, that asking somebody with a question will not plant the idea in their head in case they are not thinking about suicide. They may just get irritated because you asked, but that is fine. But in case somebody is actually suicidal, again, you can't make them more suicidal by asking. In fact, you will actually make them feel relieved, and they will feel, uh, you know, they feel like maybe they want to talk about it because they've been carrying this burden for a long time. Yeah. So
Yeah.
please go ahead and ask. The way to ask it is very different. Either you can ask them directly or you can ask them indirectly. The way to ask it directly would be, if the person is very agitated, you can say, have you been thinking about suicide? Have you thought about, indirectly, you can say, have you been thinking about, have you been feeling like you want to sleep and not wake up anymore? Do you feel like you're a burden, and because you're a burden, therefore you would like to die by suicide? There are many ways to ask the question. Find a way which is easy for you. You can say, have you been thinking about it? Have you, and if they say yes, they have, and then say, would you like to talk about it? And then you'd want to communicate to say that you care and you're concerned, and you're here to help, and you're here to listen. It's very important to listen. Once you ask the question and they decide to talk about it, very important to listen without any judgment, without you um, offering any solutions unless they ask you for it. The most important is to listen, to communicate to them that you're listening, to communicate to them that you understand the pain and the suffering that they're going to. Even if you don't understand, you can acknowledge that they're going through a lot of pain and they're going through a lot of suffering. What you also have to understand at this point in time is to remain calm and listen and respond, be kind, be concerned, and that can make a huge difference while you're talking to somebody who's suicidal.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, sir, as you also told, like, it's difficult to know. I agree, it's difficult to know if someone is facing such issues, if he or she is disturbed. So, can you shed some light on what are the basic suicidal tendencies or the signs of self harm, like through which we can get an idea that the person is disturbed and he can take such step?
Yeah. Okay. So, um, 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal will give you verbal or non-verbal signs. These are signs, even they can be even written. These signs are, especially among young people, it will be there on social media, and they will either directly or indirectly start to communicate that they're disturbed, right? So you'll have messages like saying, what is the point of living? Life is such a burden. Or they could be cryptic messages. They could be copy and paste of memes, of um, photographs of maybe personalities who have died by suicide. Maybe they're talking about current deaths, like the suspected suicide of Sushant Singh. Maybe they start to self-identify with other people who have died. So look out. These are signs which are there. You'll also notice. Look out for these signs, right? A person is having difficulty sleeping. Very important. If they've been having difficulty sleeping for more than 24 to 72 hours, they are very agitated. And also, at this point in time, if you haven't slept, you have a issue with thinking clearly. Your brain is not functioning properly. So in this state, it's like a brain fog, and you're unable to think clearly. And you combine that with a lot of pain and suffering and anguish, which is referred to like as psychic distress or psychic. And you combine that with perhaps a history of, let's say, depression, and you have all of these things which are difficult to bear. So signs will be having difficulty sleeping, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, eating too little, any behavior which is different of that person, irregular, which is different, right? Physically they look different, they're dressing different, they've shaved off their head, or they've done something new with with themselves. Look out for those signs. Social withdrawal, isolation, getting agitated, not talking, or maybe talking too much, uh, substance abuse, drinking too much, using drugs, being hostile, and talking about harming themselves, um, telling you strange things, having a slurry speech, where they look tired and fatigued. All of this are signs, and you have to then take it very seriously. I also want to point out uh, two, there are three other things I want to point out. One is what I mentioned are all warning signs, and these warning signs can be picked up. And like I said, it is important to start talking and listening. And if in doubt, ask the question directly, saying, "Are you thinking of suicide?" Which is very important. You rather have an irritated, angry friend than a dead friend. So I've spoken about warning signs. Now there is the other factor, which is basically risk factors. Risk factors make you predisposed to dying by suicide. Risk factors include if you have a relative friend who's died by suicide. If you are a suicide survivor, your risk goes up. If you're part of marginalized communities, your risk factor goes up. If you're part of if you're part of the LGBT plus QIA plus community, your risk factor goes up, especially when you're coming out, especially if you don't have a supporting adult. Your risk factor when there are transitions in your life go up. You're moving to a new city, you're moving from school to college, you're moving from college to a new job. Risk factors during exams, interviews, they go up. Risk factors also include if you've had abuse as a child, whether it's child sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse. All of this are contributors. If you have a history of mental illness in your family, if you have a mental illness yourself, right? So mood and personality disorders are a huge contributing factor. And if you've had like a recent breakup, a romantic or otherwise, again, your risk goes up. So a lot of these can be handled, but if you start to combine them and they happen at the same time, which is to say, you fail an examination, your girlfriend or your boyfriend breaks up with you, and you're having trouble at home, right? So two or three factors together or more increase the risk of suicide. So I spoke about warning signs, I spoke about risk factors. Thirdly, there is protective factors, right? So I don't know whether antivirus is widely used even now, but the concept about saying protecting your computer using an antivirus is essentially a protection. Or during COVID, everybody is eating nutritious food, is exercising. It's a protective factor against COVID because you're building immunity. So think of a protective factors as building immunity towards dying by suicide. It's like adding a strength. So protective factors are either already present or they can be cultivated. What do I mean by this? Protective factors include having good friends, and I'm talking about friends who are not just Facebook, Insta followers or friends, not fair weather friends, but those friends who will be there in time of need. So ask yourself the question: if I have a problem at 1 a.m. in the morning, at 4 a.m. in the morning, if I get into trouble with with the authorities, or if I need any help related to anything, is there a 1 a.m. or 4 a.m. friend that I can call? The more friends you have, the better it is. So social connectedness to family, to friends, to the large, to more people in society is very important. It acts as a barrier. Secondly, if you have an issue with mental health, where you're stressed, anxious, or depressed, if you're currently undergoing therapy, it's a huge protective factor. If you are, basically are exercising, huge protective factor. If you are doing other things, if you have a purpose in life, huge protective factor. If you have responsibility and towards anything, whether it's to your parents, or if you have a pet, or if you have a garden, again, protective factors. If you're religious, it's a huge protective factor, because you can always count on praying, can always count on praying to God and saying, I'm going through this difficult time. Then you can build protective factors by life skills, by building your emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is the ability to bounce back after an adverse event. So all of us will go through a lot of pain and suffering. The ability to accept that this is happening and this is part of our growth is really important. It works very well. So I've mentioned all the warning signs. They're verbal, non-verbal, or they're written. I've spoke about risk factors, so they are very important. And finally, I spoke about protective factors, and you should think of this as a buffer against when you're undergoing a really tough time.
Yeah. Nelson, as you also talked about the role of families and friends, genuine friends. So, now to that, I would like to ask that how important is it on part of friends and family of vulnerable people to acknowledge their situation, and what precautions should be taken, and what should be their part?
Okay, so you're saying what is the part of friends and family
Yeah,
when there is somebody vulnerable?
their closest circle, family, peers, and relationships, especially for adolescents and elderly who have a higher level of dependency.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Okay.
according to you, what
First of all,
are
I want to ask, what is the average age of the people listening? Because then I can tailor my answers to that.
uh,
What is
it's
the age
yeah,
range?
it's 18 to 45 or 50.
Okay, but what is the average?
Mm,
Like there may be more people between
yeah,
18
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
25.
Yeah, so there are
So
more
I'm just trying
people.
to
Yeah, there are more people between 25 to 40. Like average, you can say 30, 32.
25 to 40, because all I'm just seeing the four of you, and all of you seem
Now
pretty
there are,
young. So I'm just that's why I need to know, and I can tailor make these answers.
yeah, we have
Whether
100.
25 to 40.
Yeah, there are 100
Is it
people on our
possible
Facebook
for
Live.
right now, is anybody on Facebook who's taking down questions that I can answer? Because for me, it's really important that I'm not just saying what I think is important. I need to know what is being asked. So it becomes more, and I want to take all of your questions right now, and I will answer them. I will also need to understand if there are any questions, and we'll keep time for that. Okay, to answer your question about saying how important is friends, family to deal with somebody who's vulnerable, correct? That's your question.
Yeah,
Okay, it is very important. I would say the biggest barrier to mental health, feeling suicidal, is friends and family. So friends and family is really important. Why are they important? Because see, most of the time we are dealing with a world which is very transactional, which is very competitive, and which is very temporary. So all our relationships are very transactional, most of them. The friends and family, hopefully you've developed this where you met each other in school or in college, at work, and decided that this person can be your friend, this person can be there for you in the time of need. And the family, of course, you're talking about unconditional love, which we all understand, which is saying I love you without any conditions. Secondly, a concept called unconditional positive regard, right? Unconditional positive regard is very rare. The problem with unconditional positive regard and why it's rare is because I'll explain the concept of what unconditional positive regard is. Unconditional positive regard is if somebody, most people are willing to back you and support you and love you when things are going fine. When things are not going fine, it's more difficult to support and love somebody. And the reasons are many, because we are all having our own problems. You don't want to get involved with somebody who's facing a very challenging time. There is a lot of limitation as to how much time, money, or effort that you can put into somebody. And also, at the end of it, we are all, need to be selfish, because we are all in a tough position right now, whether now or even earlier, because it's really a dog eat dog world out there, right? So to help it's easier to support somebody when they tell you, oh, I got a promotion, or I got into this college, I bought a new car, I'm on this new vacation, and like the saying, right? When you cry alone, and when you laugh with everyone, right?
Mm.
So unconditional positive regard is, I'll give you an example. Suppose, Siddharth, you suddenly get into a drinking problem. Hopefully you don't have a drinking problem. You don't look like you have a drinking problem. But assuming you suddenly have a drinking problem, right? And it gets out of hand, where it's affecting. Are you in college, or are you working right now?
I'm in college, sir.
So let's say you have a drinking problem, and you also are abusing drugs, and this starts to affect your grades. It affects your relationships. It affects the way you spend your money. It affects your relationship with your parents, with people you're close to. And your friends now try to help you. They try and help you a little, and you respond to it. You become better, and then you go back, right? So the first time around, everybody's going to help you. The second time around, some of them will help you. But if this becomes a chronic problem, then they will be like, we've tried everything, but it's not working out. Also, even in the first time, a lot of them will be like, we don't want to get involved with you. Or suppose, anybody gets into trouble with drugs, or with the authorities, or, something which is shameful, right? So suppose, you have a porn addiction or a gambling addiction. It's very difficult to support that person. It's easier to support somebody when they have a broken leg. You can support them. So unconditional positive regard is being non-judgmental, is accepting the person for who they are. Very difficult. Very few people will accept you for who you are. And that's why most people are not willing to talk about everything that's going on. And they keep it hidden. The more you keep it hidden, the more difficult it becomes. And if you're not going to be talking about it, it becomes this, this worm inside your soul, which is eating you away, and you're feeling worse and worse. And the problem with today's day and age is there are so many temptations, and there are so many sins to be, committed, right? But the problem, the point is that as human beings, we are all going to be doing things which society disapproves of, and some of these are okay to talk about, some of these are not okay to talk about. So find friends and family who provide you with not only unconditional love, but with unconditional positive regard, because you should be able to be whoever you are with at least one person. How do you become friends with that one person? Is showing your vulnerable side, is also accepting their faults. Because if you accept their faults, they will be willing to accept your faults. If you start to pick on their faults, if you're judgmental, then they're going to be judgmental as well. So very important. Uh, so how do you, the thing is, for a lot of parents, they don't know how to offer support when, you know, when somebody is going through a tough time. Now, the problem is, we are also, there are also, I want to talk about, okay, I'll talk about two things over here. Unconditional love and unconditional positive regard uh, is also for yourself. I struggle with unconditional love for myself. I struggle with loving my faults. I struggle with loving things when things go wrong. I also struggle with unconditional positive regard. I don't always hold myself, you know, with a lot of positive regard. Um, there's a lot of judgment that is there. I have to remind myself. I am reminding myself right now as we speak that it is okay for me to make mistakes as long as I accept them and I learn from them and I do not repeat them again. It is and to love myself first. So start with that and understand that there is also a concept of self compassion, which is treating yourself kindly, just like you would treat your friends or your relatives or your colleagues kindly. So this is really important. And a lot of parents have difficulty with offering sometimes unconditional love. Maybe they will offer it to a certain extent, but the unconditional positive regard is tougher to do because of societal pressures and sometimes core beliefs that each parent or, you know, a colleague or a friend is going to have. If a colleague has a core belief saying extramarital sex is taboo and is a sin and should never happen, and this is your best friend, and suppose, you know, you've had an extramarital affair, you're finding it difficult to communicate, or the person believes that anybody who you know, smokes, you know, smokes or does drugs is a criminal, and it's difficult to you know, to explain that, you know, this is the person that you are. So you're going to have a lot of these. So I'm trying to mention things which actually you know, which pushes people away and pushes you away from yourself as well, right? So some of these are, you know, controversial that I'm talking about, but these are important because these are things that I come across. So it is important now to be able to either love yourself and accept yourself, or find people who love and accept you. Also, you have to remember, maybe you can't talk about this to everyone, and therefore you need a therapist. And right now, therapy is becoming either, you know, you can call crisis helplines, which are free. I've just shared a list of clinical psychologists who are offering free services. Either they're no cost or they're low cost, and you need to talk to a therapist and find a good one. Again, over here, the important thing is to be able to tell your deep, dark, dirty secrets, and this person who's sitting in front of you is accepting you, is listening to you, is being non-judgmental, and who's looking at you as a human being regardless of the issues, the challenges, and the kind of problems that you're currently facing, even if those problems are self-created. So very important. My answers are sometimes going to be long, and I will explore different themes. Somebody keep a note of time. It's 4:40. We need to run through all the questions, and I want to keep, you know, time for audience questions as well.
Yeah, sure. So, as you also mentioned about the importance of talking to someone, especially someone who is professional, so linked into that, like even today, mental disorders are widely stigmatized across the globe, and people, especially males, are mostly reluctant to seek help from anyone. there is a taboo as the word psychiatrist still hits the wrong chord. So, do you think such behavior can compound to one's mental health problems, and what are your suggestions on this?
Okay, so it's a really good question, and whatever you said is very correct. Unfortunately, there is a huge stigma related to mental illnesses, um, the inability to talk about it, and you mentioned that everybody, a lot of people find it difficult to go to a psychiatrist or to talk about the fact that they are having an issue. So, um, like what we are doing right now is destigmatizing mental illness, mental health related issues. Normalizing these conversations are important. Talking about them in a way like you would talk about saying, you have a toothache is very important. Also, you have to understand that how would you go about doing it? I think start by talking about it to yourself. How do you explain this to yourself, right? It's important that you get convinced about it yourself. So let's say suicide. How do I talk about suicide? The first thing I say is that suicide is a disease, just like cancer, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease. Um, Earlier research was pointing out that suicide was symptomatic of other issues, that is, it's caused by other issues, right? Um, Depression, anxiety, personality disorders, uh, uh, a life event which was, destabilizing, all of that, right? And over here, I also want to point out that suicide is multifactorial and it's multi-causal. So it's multi-dimensional. So there are many dimensions which are involved. So coming back, I would talk about saying suicide is a disease. If it is a disease, there are symptoms. If there are symptoms, they can be addressed, and therefore you can actually have a cure, relatively speaking. Um, so you can actually and then I say suicide is preventable, and all of us have a role in preventing it, and we have a huge issue with suicide because of various reasons, and we can go ahead and prevent it if we can spot the signs. So same with mental health related issues. It's important to start talking about it, like we talk about uh, earlier there was this huge stigma against periods and menstruation, and now you have movies being made about Padman. It's being celebrated. It's very important. But think about 5 or 10 years back, this wasn't the case. It's completely changed. So destigmatizing mental illness starts with all of us. How would you go about doing it? Is by stating that when somebody says it's all in your head, you will say, yes, it's all in your head. And you can actually have MRI imagery, which shows that you can actually see depression. And the depressed brain is different from a brain which is not depressed. So you can actually see it physically, right? Even with post-mortem reports of completed suicides, the brain chemistry is different. There are decreased levels of serotonin and so on. So people who want physical proof, you can actually have physical proof. If you say that you're stressed, there are high rate of cortisol in your system, and your immunity starts to drop. Depression has all symptoms. Anxiety has a symptom. So all of this can be shown. So you would say, so for you need to start reading up a little and then start normalizing it. One of my favorite things about I heard from somebody who's very somebody who told me that earlier they found it difficult to even utter the word cancer, because somebody thought if you uttered the word cancer that you will actually get cancer, right? So that is the level of, now you have Sonali Bendre and a lot of people, when they get cancer, they announce it. Then they announce it that they're going for treatment. Then they announce it that my hair has fallen off, I've shaved my head, and then they announce that they're feeling better. These are cancer survivor stories, and they're being normalized. The same with depression. Deepika Padukone, Yo-Yo Honey Singh, and a lot of people are talking about it. And right now, everybody's talking about Sushant Singh, and the possibility that he may have had mental illness. Again, I want to say that there is not one cause for suicide. It is multifactorial. Mental illness is one of the reasons why people may attempt to die by suicide, but there are many causes that come together, and that's why it happens. So normalizing this conversation is very important, and you can do it day in and day out. So one way I talk about it is saying, every day we talk to people. Every day there are things that would disturb you, which make you happy. We are a bundle of emotions, and each and every interaction that we have. So think about it like food. You have a breakfast, you have a lunch, and you have a dinner, and this food which just gets collected in your teeth. You have to brush, you have to floss, you have to use mouthwash, a tongue cleaner, and even then, there's tartar and plaque, and for which you go to a dentist. The same with your brain. Every time you have, this is your process, this is your operating system. Every time you have an interaction, it's processing it here. And every time there is some bits of things which are getting stuck in your brain. And the cleanup of your brain is very important, because if you don't do it, then you're not functioning to your full capacity. So it's like flossing your brain. So visiting a therapist should be normalized. Going to a psychiatrist is important. Maybe you don't, if you are feeling that it's difficult for you to have this conversation, go ahead and talk to a psychiatrist, and you don't need to talk about it with everyone. You don't necessarily have to, but it's important that for your own sake, at least your loved ones understand that this is important to do for your basic functioning. If you don't, you're unable to do this, then you're unable to function in any which way, in any capacity. It'll affect you physically, mentally, professionally, personally, financially, spiritually. So it needs to be addressed.
Okay. So yeah, you very well explained the need of how a need and how we can remove the stigma from the society, that is by talking more about such things. So yeah. Now, coming to the last question from our team, and then we'll move to the questions from the audience.
Mhm.
So, uh, so we believe that social media today has become an environment loaded with full of emotions. Managing negative emotions in social media has become a challenge in itself. Do you feel that this version of social media or internet is impacting our mental well-being? According to you, what are the positives and negatives of social media concerning suicide risk?
Yeah. Again, a very important question, a question that needs to be answered. So, stress, anxiety, depression, and suicide rates have been increasing in the past decade and more. This has been increasing globally. And there has been a lot of research which is pointing out that stress, anxiety, depression, and suicide rates are increasing. And they're increasing at the same time, they started to increase at the same time that smartphone usage and social media usage went up. So the trajectory is almost same. If you were to map these two graphs, they're increasing at the same time. So there have been a lot of studies which has looked at this, and after keeping into account other factors which contributed to this, they do think that social media and smartphones have increased have contributed towards the rate of uh, mental issues as well as suicide rates. Not and when I say contribute, they're not the driving force. There are other forces at play, but this is important. So it is important to understand that how social media impacts us. It is so I'm not an expert at this, but I can at least give you a broad framework. Um, Increased smartphone usage starts to alter your brain and your brain chemistry and prolonged increased usage will actually alter the brain, at a very cellular level. It's going to change the brain chemistry. So one of the things that happens is those notifications that you get are dopamine hits. Each time it hits you, your dopamine receptors in your brain gets fired up, and your brain will provide you with a reward. So you are now primed to keep going back to your phone because it's providing you with some kind of pleasure. Also, increased usage of the mobile phone decreases your ability to focus and pay attention. So, and it will increase even this your ability to not to focus. So what we have is a situation where you might also lose sleep, and losing sleep then contributes towards uh, mood dysregulation and the inability to control your emotions. Therefore, that leads to having a tough time with relationships. If you're irritable, if you're getting angry, and if you're getting triggered over small things, you're all of this. So then what happens is with social media and smartphone usage is that you're digitally connected, and but you're socially isolated. So you're spending less and less time outside. Therefore, your social networks are getting depleted. And I also pointed out to the fact that social connectedness is a huge factor to not only your emotional and psychological growth, but also as a barrier towards mental health issues later on. So social media is, what happens is, let's say, uh, a lot of your self-esteem and self-respect is coming from uh, social media. Then in case that gets depleted, it becomes reduced, then therefore your own self-esteem and your self-respect and your purpose becomes less and less, right? So it's important that you understand how this works. So whether it's an Instagram or a Snapchat or a Facebook, um, this obsession over looks or what you eat or what you wear or where you're holidaying or what you're driving or how cool you are, is now being addressed by a digital entity rather than who you are as a person. Also, this discrepancy between who you are and your digital avatar sometimes are so far apart that it's difficult to bring them together. So it's important to keep asking the question about saying, um, okay, the good parts about social media is that you can find people who are similar to you. It's important that you find interests and hobbies that are similar. So I'll give you a simple example of, let's say with Instagram, that um, looking for examples of people who used to self-harm or who are suicide survivors and have overcome it is great, because then it inspires you saying, I'm not the only one with the problem. Suppose the accounts that you're looking at is actually glorifying self-harm or is motivating you to perhaps look at at dying by suicide, then it's doing harm. If there are stories of people who have gone through these issues and have sought help and have become better, then it contributes towards help seeking behaviors. In the other case, if you have stories where people are going through an issue and start to talk about saying, they have unhealthy coping mechanisms for the issues that they have, which is actually discouraging you from seeking help, then it becomes a problem. So it is very important that you can set on your smartphones timers for how much time you can spend on social media. And then also ask yourself, how many of my friends outside of social media am I keeping in touch with? Am I meeting? Am I spending enough time with? Am I bonding with? Am I talking to? And really listening to what they're saying. Really important. So I'm not somebody who says get away from social media, drop social media. but I would definitely say look for. So, uh, full disclosure, I'm late today because I was actually gone out to this forest reserve in Bangalore, and I spent time outside, with the trees and
Yeah.
birds and everything else. So a lot of my work is online, but I try and get out every day, every day. So today is the last day of Oxfam Trail Walker. I'm doing 100 kilometers in 10 days. So today, to complete it, I did about 6 or 7 in the morning. Now I have to complete 8, and I will finish 100 kilometers. Remember that social media and smartphones are important, but just being locked up in a digital world, feeling digitally connected, will keep you socially isolated. And what what you spend your time on is what you eventually become. It's very important to reduce it. And if you're young, it's more important that you do it. If it's important to kind of understand that self-care is in every which way: physical, mental, emotional, psychological, all of these aspects. And I would urge all of you to look at the self-care wheel. There's this wheel of self-care, and you can actually track it and say, today, did I do self-care physically? Did I do self-care psychologically? Did I do it spiritually? Did I do it psychologically? Did I do it socially? So at the end of the week, you say, oh, socially, I haven't actually gone and spoken to my friends or spent time with my relatives. I haven't spent time spiritually by praying or meditating. All of this is important, because if you don't have an all-round growth, it's going to affect you. And if what you treasure, you should measure, and only what you measure can you change.
Yeah.
So all of us measure a lot of things about saying, this is my bank balance, this is how much I'm earning, these are my marks, this is how much I need to get into this college. This is and physical attributes. All of these are measured, but the most important thing is the mental aspect. So if you don't start to the problem with measuring something mental is, you can go to a diagnostic center and measure your heart, your how good your heart is, whether you're diabetic or or your cholesterol levels. But mentally, we are not measuring anything. How do we know how mentally fit we are? We don't. How stressed are you? You don't. It's only when the physical aspects of the mental issues crop up that you become there's higher stress, there's high blood pressure. High blood pressure then makes you maybe diabetic. Blood pressure plus diabetes makes you you can have a heart attack. That's when we wake up. But to there are many free resources to measure your stress, anxiety, and your depression. And post that, there's no need to be alarmed if you find out that you're actually anxious or you're depressed. You just need to do the same thing you would do if you were to find out that you're overweight. So heart disease, after scientists discovered that exercise, low cholesterol diets, and all of this, if leading a non-sedentary life can reduce heart disease, they started saying it: do it, do it, do it. The same with mental health. We have a few things, if we do it, will be highly helpful. So before I take audience questions, I would say self-care includes all the things I mentioned, right? You sleep 7 to 8 hours every day. You go to sleep at the same time. You reduce your social media and your smartphone usage. You start to read more. You spend more time with friends and family. You also take care of your financial health, or making sure that you're scoring enough marks to get into a college that you want to get into. Um, you're eating nutritious food. You're spending time with the nature. Nature can really heal. So you can do deep breathing, meditation, yoga, and cardiovascular activities, which improve your cardiovascular health. Even 5 minutes would make a huge difference. So all of these contribute towards you feeling better. Um, and it's very important that you do. And the earlier that you start off doing these things and make it a habit, the better it is, because then you're not going to start doing this when you have a crisis. There's no need to hit a crisis before you start inculcating these habits into your daily life.
Yeah, so it's most important to take care of yourselves. So because there's nothing more important than our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now coming to the Q&A from the audience. So we'll not be using the names because of the sensitivity of the issue, but yeah, we'll be using the place, the city and their place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question from our friend from Delhi, India. That is, uh, do you think an increased number of working hours is a trigger? If yes, why is that European countries with lesser working hours, lesser working days also host a large number of suicides?
Uh, Longer working hours definitely do not allow you to have a balanced um work and life
What life? Yeah.
balance, right? Your work-life balance gets disrupted because you're working more. Therefore, you have less time for family, for friends, to getting out, to doing exercise, um, to cooking your own meal, mm, to praying, to doing all the other things that are important. So longer working hours are detrimental, of course, to mental health. And obviously, at some point in your life, you're going to have longer working hours. If you're younger and you have no responsibilities, you're going to be working harder. Also, remember that your body can take a lot more of lack of sleep and so on. But eventually, lack of sleep will disrupt everything. So, yeah, Ariana Huffington's book on how, Ariana Huffington is the founder of Huffington Post, and now she started a company called Thrive. Thrive is a company that looks at well-being. So just this longer working hours, and I'm just pointing out to one thing or two things, let's say. Uh, it leads to you maybe spending less time with friends and family, less time, three things I'll say: physical health, and finally, lack of sleep. Lack of sleep, it decreases productivity. Lack of sleep will affect your relationships. Lack of sleep will make you more irritable, which means that you might end up having a fight with your boss or your colleague, and you're generally feeling very low, right? Uh, the next question about saying European countries have lesser working hours, but they also have a high rate of suicides. Uh, I'm guessing you're talking about some Scandinavian countries, and their rate of suicide might be high compared to other European countries. I'm not sure whether the other high, some of them are pretty high, but mostly I would say this is a function of, if I'm not mistaken, SAD. SAD meaning seasonal affective disorder, when they have no light. So among the highest rate of suicides, I think, are in places like Greenland and so on. Over here, so I don't think that they have a high rate of suicides because they're working less. There are other contributing factors, and one of the biggest contributing factors is the lack of sunlight. So seasonal affective disorder is basically depression that happens when there is longer periods of darkness and lesser periods where there is light.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
mean like geographical conditions also play a role in suicide, right?
Geographical conditions play a big role in suicide. So less light contributes. It's called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. There are a higher rate. The rates of suicide go up in countries when during times of when there is less light, because you need it for your psychological well-being. It's possible that there is also a higher rate of alcohol consumption during this time to compensate, uh, because maybe you're staying indoors, or because you are trying to self-medicate. So yeah, I would say this is it. So very clearly, uh, you know, if you're working longer hours, it is detrimental to your mental well-being. Shorter hours also make you, the countries where which are highly productive are also countries which work shorter hours.
Yeah.
Very much, they work shorter hours.
Okay. So, as you also raised the concept of what are the major causes, and we talked about the geographical cause as well. So, the next question that is raised by our friend from South Africa is that what are the common causes of suicide or suicidal behavior? Some common causes that are very prominent.
So again, I want to say, mostly when you hear of suicide, you're going to hear of, the media reports it saying this is what happened, and therefore the person died. They attribute it to a single cause. That's usually the trigger. There are a lot of other causes that happen, and there are a lot of contributing factors. I already mentioned people, populations which are at a higher risk. So geographical factors, cultural factors, religion. So in countries where religion prohibits suicide and treats it as as a sin, uh, have low rates of suicide. This does not mean that the person. It also leads to lower, higher well-being or lower rates of mental health related issues. So genetic factors, biological factors, environmental factors, mental illness, substance abuse, lifestyle issues, precipitating factors. What do I mean by precipitating factors? You could possibly be in the pink of health. You haven't had a depressive episode ever. You've had a great childhood. You're financially fine. So again, a contributing factor is not having a social or economic safety net, which means poverty, physical illness. Those who have recently been diagnosed with, especially a terminal illness, will are at high risk. So we hear precipitating factors. Like I said, you know, a lot of people who will say, "Oh, I'm perfectly fine, and I have no issues, and I haven't ever been depressed, and I haven't ever thought of suicide, and my life is going great." And boom, one factor can completely derail you. It can be something that happens to you, maybe an accident, maybe you lose a foot or an arm, or you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, or one of your parents pass on. Somebody who you love very much passes on. It could be a grandparent, it could be a sibling. uh, you could be in love and you can have a breakup. So many factors completely can derail one, even if you have like a life which is like perfectly going fine. It's important to understand that we as humans, there can be one factor and that factor can really upset everything else. So we need to be aware that there are many factors, there are many causes to suicide. Also, I want to mention that not everybody who is depressed is going to die by suicide. It puts you at risk, but it doesn't mean that you're going to like die by suicide. Not everybody who drinks or abuses drugs will die by suicide. Not everybody who faces an adverse life event, which can be the three worst things that can happen to you are death, somebody you love dies, debt, which means that you don't have a financial safety net, you're in debt, or it's divorce, or think of it as a breakdown of relationships, right? So uh, they really hurt you, and they can completely derail you. So it's important that there are many causes. If you have one cause, if you have one risk factor, it's okay. If you have many contributing factors which happen at the same time, like I said, suppose you have a parent who dies, at the same time you lose your job, and you were in a long-term relationship, and that relationship is currently in trouble, and you've recently started drinking too much. So you have a parent who's died, you've just lost a job, your boyfriend or girlfriend is threatening to leave you, and you've started to abuse um, a substance. These are many factors that come. So your ability, your protective factors start to, like, your defense, it's like boom, 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 boom. You're like staving off these bullets one by one, but eventually they start to weaken you, and you could slip into depression, and the depression then could lead you to drink more. You drinking more could then inhibit your ability to find a new job. Not having a job means you don't have finances. Not having finances means maybe that you're not in the best position to attract a new member into your life. So think about it, right? It can
Yeah.
all break down completely.
Yeah. So we have another question from someone from Bombay, India, and it's more or less related. So this guy is talking about that some factors are visible, like you taught, like drug abuse or drinking problems, but there are certain problems that are not visible as well. And there can be people who don't want to share their private life with others. So, what is the best way to monitor a suicidal person without invading in his or her private life?
So it's important to watch out for the signs I've already mentioned, and then it's important to show your concern, and the concern can be shown in many ways. You can just say, suppose it's a friend who's struggling with a heavy course load. You can say, hi, I see that you're suffering with this course load, can I help you? Maybe someone is struggling at work, and you say, can I help you with work? You can say, um, can you join me for a meal? You can say, can we go out for a cup of coffee? You don't necessarily have to start asking them about their problems. You can just go for a walk, have a cup of coffee, and you can do the talking. You can go watch a movie, you can go to the park, you can spend some time having a meal, and you can then start to listen to what they are going through. And the questions can be very open-ended. You can just say, um, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Is there anything I can perhaps help you with? I'm here to listen. Um, and so on. Very open-ended questions.
Yeah.
And slowly, you'll have to build that bond with the person before they open up. And it's possible that what they're going through is not something they want to talk about. It can be very shameful. Suppose you have a parent who's an alcoholic and who's lost their job, right? How are you going to talk about it? It's pretty shameful. Recently, I came across somebody who, somebody called from Australia, and his friend is suicidal, and I realized that this person is telling me about his friend's problem, but I also realized that it must be something that he's finding it difficult to talk about, because he kept saying, my friend, everybody loves him, he has a good position in society, he's got a good family and all of that. And then he said, and then he said he's finding it difficult to talk to them. He's not been able to talk to anyone, right? So I realized that, yeah, this must be something that there's a bit of shame involved. So finally he said that his friend has been, sexually assaulted by a male colleague. And he's unable to talk about this to his wife or to his children or to his friends. And only one friend knows. This is the friend who's called me. And he also said that he went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was helpful, but also was judgmental by saying, did you contribute, to this, whatever happened, did you like encourage it, or did you play a role? The person was judgmental, right? Wasn't offering unconditional positive regard. And that's very shameful. If you're talking about a gambling addiction or a porn addiction or what I just mentioned, or it's very difficult to talk about it. And so you can provide emotional support without knowing what the person is going through.
Okay.
You can offer emotional support saying, I'm here for you, I will be here for you, and I want to listen to you, and you can talk about me, about anything, and you don't necessarily have to tell me about what really happened. Very important. Don't put pressure, and don't put pressure on a timeline saying, oh, I spent 1 hour with you, I spent 2 days with you, and you're not telling me about what's happening. You don't be curious, be concerned.
Yeah.
Very important. Your concern, your kindness, your empathy will make the difference between the person dying by suicide and not dying by suicide. So and also you might talk to them and offer help and say, I'm willing to take you to a therapist. Maybe the things that you're going through, you want somebody to listen to you, without any judgment. So you can offer to do that as well. And the person might agree, or the person might not agree, right? So it's important to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So providing a comfortable space and not judging others, like these are the key points.
Yeah. Remember what I told you, some of the things that the person will tell you goes against your core beliefs. It becomes more difficult for you to listen without prejudice and without being judgmental. So be very careful about what you say, because you might think that you're trying to motivate, but you're actually pushing them far, far away, right? So this morning I was on a call with a parent, very worried, and about their son, and um, somebody who's going through behavioral issues as well as substance abuse issues. And the parent basically said, you're a criminal because you're abusing, drugs, and you're not my son. You're a criminal. Just imagine what the son is going through, when maybe all they're trying to do is, it's a cry for help. A lot of substance abuse is a way to self-medicate for an undiagnosed mental health related issue, or it's a way to cope with trauma. Unresolved trauma will eventually perhaps lead to substance abuse as a way to deal with trauma. I don't blame the parent, not at all, because they don't know better. They don't know the language to use. So what I'm trying to tell all of you is, there is going to be someone, especially, now that you've maybe have learned. So all of you should do the gatekeeper training, and I think, Siddharth, you should share that information, which is a 1-hour certificate course to help prevent suicide. And it's gatekeeper training is a World Health Organization recommended suicide prevention strategy. It's a 2-hour webinar, or it's a 1-hour online course, but it'll help you to deal with somebody who's suicidal. Coming back to this, if you start to talk to somebody and say, I'm here for you, I want to listen to what you're saying, you don't have to divulge all the details, but whatever it is, at least tell me about how you're feeling and how I can support you. Is there any way I can support you? They might suddenly open up and they tell you something, like I said, right, which can be very shocking. And there are many, many things that society views as shameful, but may have happened, and may have been a genuine mistake. It's important to to just take a moment to take a deep breath, and even though it messes up with your core beliefs, is to tell them that, this must be really difficult for you. I can imagine the pain and the suffering that you're going through. There must be a lot of shame and anguish related to this. But even this shall pass. And whatever it is that you have done or said, um, you know, it is important to know that it is perfectly fine. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you should go about thinking that you're worthless, helpless, and hopeless, and your situation can't be saved. I am here for you, and you know, I can, you can also try and mobilize friends and family support. So it's very important to do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nelson. Like, really. And coming to the last part of the Q&A session,
Mhm.
last question. So, a friend from Thailand wants to know, like, what can each of us do in our daily lives to scale up our mental well-being? Would you
Mhm.
recommend any daily exercises or activities that can help us to improve our mental health?
Yeah. So number one, initially, you can just have whatever works for you. You can have a diary, you can have post-it notes, you can have a journal, and you can start, looking at simple things that you can do. Very simple things. Start with getting sleep. Start with eating all 3 meals at the same time. Start with building a routine. Start with being kind to yourself about how you motivate. Use self-compassion rather than words that will hurt you to motivate you. Start with repairing relationships with friends, with family members, with siblings. Start with saying sorry if you've done anything wrong. Start with saying thank you, appreciation. Start waking up in the morning and saying, I'm grateful today for just waking up. I'm grateful that I can see. I'm grateful that I can walk. I can, start. And a gratitude journal, if your heart is filled with gratitude, there is no place in your heart to feel other things. Start with understanding uh, that in case you've had a negative experience which has affected you emotionally, psychologically, that you need to seek professional help. Start with getting a lot of sun, nature, and exercise. Even if you can get 5 minutes of cardiovascular disease, to fight against, cardiovascular activity. I haven't had my lunch. I'm going to have now, so I'm like hitting a, my brain is not fully functioning. But what I want to say is, even 5 minutes of just skipping or doing jumping jacks or walking up and down will make a huge difference. Taking a walk, if you can't run, take a walk. If you're currently in a space where you can't get out of the house, walk in your house. If you just have so much space, just do jumping jacks or skip. Take a few minutes to close your eyes and do a few deep breathing exercises, right? Take a deep breath for 3 minutes, 3 seconds. 3 seconds of the deep breath, 3 seconds of holding it, and 3 seconds of exhaling. Do this 10 times. Start doing it 20 times. Start doing it for longer periods of time, right? Then just meditate with just listening to what's happening around you. All of these things can play a huge role. And do these basic things, and they can make a huge difference. And if you're currently having, suspecting that you may be depressed, how do you know that you're depressed? It's pretty. What's the difference between feeling sad and being depressed, right? If you for 2 weeks or more, you are feeling that you're feeling low, there is fatigue, you're sleeping too much or sleeping too little, you have a craving for junk food, or you're not eating at all, you are socially withdrawing and not meeting with friends or family, if you've stopped doing activities where you had a lot of interests in your hobbies, if you are abusing substances, if you're feeling an increased urge to have things which provide temporary relief, like maybe sugar or alcohol or doing drugs, if you're feeling a kind of anger towards other people or towards yourself, if you're having trouble regulating your moods as well as your emotions, all of this means that you could be depressed, clinically depressed. And then it's important that you talk to a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist and try and address this and nip it in the bud. If you're having trouble concentrating, if you're having slurry speech, or you feel suddenly that you're hallucinating, all of this could be clinical depression, and it's important that you address it, right? So self-care routines, some of these are long term. Some of the long term self-care routines I would say is investing in friends, and in a lot of friends and family, having that 1 a.m. or 4 a.m. friend, eating right, exercising, making sure that you have finances, because any finances, when you lose a job or other things, and if you don't have finances, making sure that like I said, you have a community where you're doing things which are healthy coping mechanisms. All of us are going to hit a rough patch, so you need to have healthy coping mechanisms. Or you know right now I'm trying to start cycling and build a community around cycling. Earlier I had a community of playing football with my friends. I'm no longer playing football. So those kind of things are what you need to be doing. Having
Okay.
a hobby, painting, sketching, all of these things are very important. Gardening, all of this actually is great for your mental well-being.
Yeah. I think Nelson, you have covered a lot of points. Yeah, and I hope, I believe that our audience also learned a lot of things from this
Hmm.
insightful Q&A session and will take back a lot of things with us.
Hmm.
So now it's almost 5:30, and it's time to summarize our session. And
Hmm.
I no, so Amisha, it's your turn now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nelson. It was very insightful. I think a lot of us
Hmm.
learned a number of things. Honestly,
Hmm.
for me, it was the fact that something like geographical location, something which we don't even have a control over, can
Hmm.
also play such an important role in contributing towards our mental health. So
Absolutely.
for me, it was like something very enlightening, and I think most of the people feel the same way. And if I may add a personal note, that I went through your article that you wrote on the Quint, which
Hmm.
mentioned the main reason for you to embark on this journey and be a part of this foundation. And I think it is one of the most heart wrenching and true stories that I've come across, honestly. And it was a pleasure
Hmm.
having you with us.
Thank you very much for reading it. And
Yeah.
yeah, we can all play a role. Initially, we can play a role with taking care of our own mental health, and slowly we can start helping those who are undergoing an issue as well. So yeah, I think we all can start with ourselves and then move towards helping others, and make mental health as part of our lives. It's not removed from our lives, but is part. We even to talk about it, it's very important. And slowly we need to build emotional resilience, because as humans, like I said, think of this as an emotional GPS. We have a GPS. That 1 kilometer from now there's a traffic. There's more traffic, or there's, think of it like saying there's a pothole and so on. In our lives, is similar, right? If you say that uh, at 18 you'll have to now prepare to get into college, and getting into college is tough. After college, it's difficult to now to find a job. After you find a job, it's difficult to move a city and to make friends. After you get married, it's very difficult for you to now adjust with in-laws. After you have a child, then there's this whole concept of postpartum. When you're about 35 to 40, you hit midlife crisis, because now you're thinking about saying, oh, maybe my dreams have died, or I'm not earning enough, or I'm getting old, or I'm not fit, or I'm no longer in love with my wife or my husband, or my children are giving me it's challenging to bring up children. Same, in your 40s, it can be physical illness. So it depends. So having an emotional GPS kind of like helps you to understand, hey, there's trouble ahead, I can prepare right now. So same with finances, we are very good with that, by saying, oh, okay, parents are always saying, oh, my child is going to get married, oh, I need to save up for higher education. So same with our mental health. We don't account, like nobody talks about how difficult it is, to make a transition from city A to city B and to join a company. This whole concept of adulting, we you don't become an adult till the time you're 25, because your prefrontal cortex, which allows you to make executive decisions, regulate your moods, not to be reckless in your behaviors, not to keep repeating a mistake, is not fully developed till the time you're 25. But all the important decisions in your lives are made before you're 25. Almost all, related to your career or the job that you want or the company that you want to be working with, what you're going to study, and so on and so forth. And sometimes the person that you want to settle down is with as well. So it's important to understand that we are not fully equipped to handle the challenges and the curveballs that life throws at us, but we can start preparing for them from day one. Death, right? I lost my friend at 20 when I was 24 to suicide. I lost my dad when I was 19 years old. I lost my mother when I was 25 years old. For a lot of people, it will completely derail your life. Okay. But I'm saying, luckily for me, my foundation was my religion, and I had a very supportive sister. I had a lot of good friends. So in life, you're going to come across a lot of trials, challenges, and they're going to hit you, and life is unfair. But as long as you have loving friends, family, and you start building life skills and emotional resilience, and you understand that it's okay to be not okay, then it becomes easier for all of you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful again. And if I may ask all the team members to turn on their cameras for a group photo,